Welcome to Sanford Speaks, the podcast that provides valuable insights and information to help parents and students navigate the world of education. Today's host is Sanford Communications Director and IT Director, Cheryl Fleming. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Welcome to Sanford Speaks. Today, we are going to begin the first in the series of several podcasts about living, learning, and teaching during the pandemic. Our guests today are Sanford School's three counselors: upper school counselor Sarah Satinsky, middle school counselor Courtney Greger, and lower school counselor Sky Rashkind. Our topic today is going to be tips to help preschool through sixth grade students manage stress. But before we get started, I'm going to ask each of the counselors to introduce themselves. Probably not necessary because they've spoken before, but for those of you who might be new to our podcast, I'll let each of them give you a little bit of background about themselves. Why don't we start with Sky?
So thanks so much for that, Cheryl, for that introduction. I'm very excited to be here today with my two amazing counterparts in middle and upper school. A bit of background about me. I've been an educator, I can't believe it, for about 25 years now, in a variety of different roles, from admissions to a lot of time in the classroom. I've been a museum educator, and now for the last number of years, a school counselor, predominantly in lower school, but also spent some time in middle school. I have two children, both in high school, who are also living through this pandemic. So I have the parent hat on as well, always as a school counselor, but also in this conversation. So thanks so much, and that's it, thanks.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Greger. I'm the middle school counselor and learning services coordinator. Thank you, Cheryl, for your introduction. I have been at Sanford School this is my second year. And before transitioning into this role, I have been in cognitive psychology research as well as educational psychology research. So mainly studying how kids acquire their number skills and study mathematics and develop a love for mathematics, as well as learning and exploring anxiety related to mathematics. And so I'm very excited. I've been in research for about 6 or 7 years, and then I transitioned into a school counseling role in public education for 2 years, and now I'm in the private school sector. So very excited to be at Sanford and be working aside Sarah Satinsky and Sky Rashkind.
And I'm Sarah Satinsky. I'm the upper school counselor. I've been at Sanford now. This is my 5th school year. I previously worked in a couple other independent schools in various roles and was formerly in private practice as a therapist. And I am looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, thank you so much. We are excited to have you. I think you always hear me say whenever we get together, I walk out with a wealth of information that I have from my own knowledge and that I can also share with others. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. I think I'd like to begin with talking about COVID-19 just in general and whether or not young kids feel stress from that. I have never lived through a pandemic. I'm a parent, but certainly we never had any issue that I think rose to this level when my kids were young. So I guess my first question is, does something like a global pandemic create stress in young children, or are they just too young to even be aware of what's going on?
I think from my perspective, I wish we were too young for them to notice what's going on. But of course, they feed off of our energies as parents and educators and caregivers, and they do understand more than we give them credit for, certainly at times. So yes, what we have noticed, I would say less so here at Sanford, and I can explain why that's my opinion. But in general, in the greater in the area, as well as in the United States and across the world, really, what we're finding is higher levels of stress in our youngest kids. And again, they feed off of us, but also they hear things right? They hear things from us. They hear things because media is a constant part of their lives, of all of our lives. And they know because we have to tell them, right? They understand why we're wearing masks, even at 2 or 3 years old. They understand that there's this virus that can make them sick, can make the people that they love sick. So yes, we are seeing higher levels of stress. I think here at Sanford, what I've noticed is, yes, we have higher levels of stress in our students, and we are seeing that on a daily basis, but we get to be together. And so we get to process it in a community that's caring and safe and loving, and that students know. For the students that are not able to be in school right now, are not able to have that normalcy, we're seeing much higher rates of stress and anxiety and depression and beyond.
Yeah, I think students are just more perceptive as young as, like Sky said, 2, 3, really young ages. They're more perceptive than we realize. They hear, they listen, they feed off the adult energies, like Sky shared. And I think knowing that that's the case, it's really important to answer those young mind questions that come up in age appropriate ways, while also offering some hope. Like, scientists are working really hard to figure out, how we can move forward. So answering their questions while also offering hope can help mitigate some of their anxieties and worries, and also not leave them just feeling like this sense of uncertainty is looming, even though as adults it does feel that is the case.
And just as only other thing to add would be that the pandemic is different, and we're living in a different world, but how worry manifests for children might look the same for a variety of their types of worries. So what I mean is, like, they may still they may not know how to express their worries, so they may say things like, if you're noticing that your child is saying, like, I feel sick all the time. So those patterns of, like, consistent worrying or feeling sick, like having stomach aches or headaches, or changes in mood and sleep patterns, or checking out from certain responsibilities. Those are all, like, we're always looking for patterns of behavior. So, just keeping an eye out for that with your children those are some of the signs and symptoms of, is my child, is worry part of their everyday life right now?
Perfect segue into Sarah, did you have something to add? Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Okay, I was thinking, what are some of the signs and symptoms, especially with young kids who sometimes aren't as communicative or able to put things into words? What kind of signs and symptoms, in addition to what Courtney just talked about, should folks be looking for?
One of the biggest things in youngest kids is that we see some regression. So let's say a 3-year-old, 4-year-old who has been potty trained for 6 months or a year or longer, all of a sudden they're having accidents. Or a child that's been sleeping through the night for some period of time, or at least regularly, all of a sudden they're back in your room. Those are some of the kind of regression noticings that, as a parent, you might go, wait a minute, where's this coming from? What's going on? What's the change? And it might not necessarily be a change. It just might be that the child is expressing themselves in the way that they know how, which is physically, right? Especially if they don't have words, something changes that triggers, whatever that response is. And often it can be that stress or that worry. You might just see a new fear, right? Like something that doesn't make sense to you, that crops up with your child. Or let's say before, they were so excited about Santa and now they're not. They might think, could Santa bring COVID down the chimney when he comes to bring our presents, which is so sad. But, those new fears can crop up as well.
In terms of,
I was just going to say, I think what Courtney mentioned earlier with the change of pattern and behaviors, that's the biggest thing to notice. So whether it's a new fear or a physical ailment coming up, or possibly they're acting out more than they used to in the past, they're demanding things in different ways than they used to. When you're seeing a change and it lasts and it seems significant compared to how things were previously, then there's likely something up. And sometimes kids will express what's going on, and you can acknowledge right away, oh, you're feeling so worried about that. But more often than not, they don't say outright what's going on. And so using your parent gut to imagine or think what they're probably feeling worried or stressed or scared about and point it out for them, name it for them. Naming that feeling can be really helpful. And when you're having your own feelings as a parent, model for them talking out and processing big feelings and hard things. It's okay to say, I feel really sad about the change in plans this year. I wish we could have had your birthday party. It makes me disappointed that we're having to do it in a different way. It's okay to model that disappointment, because it helps your kids know that there's a way to verbalize it and that those feelings are legitimate and real and okay to have.
The only other thing I would add with that is, they having that ongoing conversation, like Sarah said, is pretty much the vital piece for middle school students. Typically what I see with like chronic worrying is, you may also see that if they're not saying like, I feel, they may not know how to put a name to their feelings. They may express their feelings by saying negative things about themselves, others, or like things in the world around them. Just saying like things like, I'm stupid, or I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to handle this. So just being on the lookout for like, unusual or lots of negativity all of the time, may be another way that they're trying to process that worrying and stress.
And Sky touched upon this point a little while ago when she said sometimes you see some regression. Does that manifest itself differently among different ages, or do you see it in different ways within school settings?
That's a great question. Sarah, Courtney, I'm happy to throw it your way if you have something specific.
Yeah, I mean, I think the potty training example you gave is a really concrete, easy one to see, but it can definitely vary across the age span. Maybe a student who is starting to feel more independent, wanting to do things on their own, is now wanting to sit on their parent lap more often. That's okay. It's just maybe different than what they had been doing as the average sixth grader. Perhaps they're wanting to drink out of a sippy cup. It's small things, and it's not that they're concerning. It's just something to note when it's a change in pattern and behavior. At school, it may look like asking for the teacher's support more than they used to, needing extra reassurance, needing extra guidance and hand-holding, if you will, because they're feeling something inside and they're not sure what it is, how to name it. And so they end up regressing to behaviors that are a little bit more typical of younger students. That is certainly something that can happen.
Exactly. And I think that less so like regression, but more so I'm just thinking in terms of those, the tween ages in middle school and whatnot. I think one of the biggest things we may see is like just acting out behaviors. So maybe if they were more, they acted a certain way in class and they were on top of the work, but then maybe with a sudden change, or even just with the pandemic or now some type of worry or stress in their life, they may, you may see more acting out or externalizing behaviors with them in the classroom or with peers or with parents.
I think there's probably not a one-size-fits-all answer to this question, but when you see those patterns, or when you see some of that, I want to use the sippy cup instead of the cup that I had been using, or you see some of those changes, is it sort of a case-by-case basis where it might be, okay, let's go ahead and just go with this flow, or should parents and other adults who are in young children's lives say, no, we don't do that. Let's go to where we typically have been with this kind of act or behavior or what have you?
So my gut answer on that, and I know Sky was going to pitch it, or
Yeah,
pipe in too, but what I always like to think when I see a change in behavior is addressing what's behind the behavior more so than the behavior. So instead of saying, no, we don't do that, or that's for babies, or addressing something that might look concerning, think about why they might be doing that. That makes you feel safer. You really want to be close to me right now, when a kid is wanting to sit on your lap more than they used to. Maybe that sippy cup example you shared. Sometimes it feels easier to belittle and it kind of think about what might be going on for them and name that feeling. There's a little phrase, if you can name it, you can tame it. And so when students, and for yourself too as an adult, when you can name a feeling, when you can isolate and think about what might be going on internally deep down, that kind of helps tame or mitigate that external presentation of what we see. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I think it depends on what it is too. So I think you're right. There is no one size fits all answer. But I think understanding kind of what's at the root, is this a fear? Is this just a comfort? What's kind of behind it, and trying to understand from their perspective, depending on how old they are and whether or not they have some of those words. And maybe you help them develop, finding some of those words, and sharing that with them, sharing that experience with them, and helping them with the naming part. But I don't think it's a one size fits all, and it also depends on what it is. If all of a sudden you've got a child who's in your room 5 nights in a row because they're not sleeping, it's probably not just that they want to be with you in the middle of the night, right? Or that, there's something else going on. There's a why behind it. So what is that struggle? What is that fear? What is that worry? To look a little deeper, I think is really smart.
Mm-hmm. I also think with the behaviors, usually in the moment, especially if it's an acting out behavior or something that might elicit a negative parent response, remembering that in that moment, the child isn't going to be able to logically think through right and wrong. And so just naming that feeling, they hit a sibling or they do something kind of destructive in the house, being able to say, you're really frustrated right now. When I'm frustrated, you give them some choices. I like to run outside or scream into a pillow. Maybe give them 2 choices of something to do to get out that frustration. And then later, when they're calmed down and more emotionally regulated, that's when you can address the behavior and discuss it. Certainly if someone's in danger, if they're hurting themselves or others, you want to stop it. But naming that feeling, giving them a safe and appropriate way to express that, modeling yourself. I'm feeling frustrated too. Let's go run outside in 10 circles, something that might feel helpful, and then address the concern later.
That brings me to, I guess, a more tangible question too. What strategies are out there? It sounds to me like getting outside and getting some exercise and being able to burn off some of that would be helpful. Are there some specific strategies for kids who are, say, from preschool to 6th grade? Their activities are certainly different from upper school students in grades 9 through 12. What kind of strategies would you recommend for parents to try?
Anything you can do to keep things normal, right? Having a schedule, having routines in place, having fun, just making, whatever it is, try to make it into something fun, especially if you're noticing that your child is struggling or stressed, and you're trying to help them navigate how to reduce stress. I think the biggest thing, to be honest, is part of what you mentioned, is that, kind of just those normal, getting the exercise, eating well, sleeping well for yourself, because you can't really support them. You can't really help them if you're super stressed as well. And along those same lines, I think it's just checking yourself regularly. Am I modeling for my child? Am I presenting as someone who's really stressed out all the time? Am I, showing my own worries all the time? And trying to calm that, or to decrease those worries in yourself, or to get help, right? To get help if you really need it, so that you can really support your child well.
And with that, I think, just thinking about other strategies to reduce stress, like Sky said, of course, like taking care of yourself as a parent, and then, helping them. The exercise is absolutely vital. This is a time, usually if we're talking about the pandemic, or if you're worrying, it's usually very chaotic for a child to go through. And so the routines, absolutely, like Sky said, are vital. But helping them create a sense of control and autonomy in this time is really, really, really important. So what can that look like? That can look like having them develop their own project. Maybe they build something, or maybe they take on a new skill, like they start painting, or they try a new sport outside with a sibling, or they do a YouTube exercise, like if you're indoors, that's fine too. I think if anything, you're exercising or you are partaking in something that gives you that control and makes you feel confident and allows you to just to keep on with every day.
Courtney, I made a note to also mention the importance of control. So much about the happenings of a pandemic has led to a loss of control. We can't control who we can see and when, what we're able to do, and not so much of it has been taken out of our control. And the kids feel that too. So another way to help find control for them is to give them age appropriate decisions and choices to make. Maybe it's for a meal, for dinner one night, or for what they're going to play, or if they're going to go to bed at 8:05 or 8:15, very small but age appropriate choices can help give back that sense of control. And another thing that parents can do to help manage the stress of children who are feeling overwhelmed is to schedule time in. And it's easy when kids are acting out or things are getting frustrated. Sometimes parents will use timeouts, but I like to suggest the idea of a time in, which would just be like a special date. Sometimes I'll write it on a little note card, like Mom and Joey, special date tonight, 5:00, pick a time, schedule it, make it special. And that's the child's time to pick exactly what they want to do. It's totally their call. It can be a game, video game where they're teaching their parent, a walk, whatever they pick. Maybe it's 15 minutes, super small. It doesn't have to take up your whole evening or afternoon. But 10 to 15 minutes where you scheduled specific time with your child, where they know that you have their full undivided attention, your phone is going to be completely put away and they know they're going to get that special time. I think even a short 10-minute chunk, even once a week, will go a really long way with kids feeling like they're getting that special time with their parent.
Well, and looking at the screens, I can see we are definitely in the midst of holiday time. And the holidays, I think, have been tough for different reasons for different people. And I can often remember when my kids were young, hearing them say things like, well, Joey's parents are going to do that. Or, Susie's going to go see her grandma. Why can't we go? Do you have any advice for how do you manage those things that, going back to that control piece that you all have been speaking so eloquently about, can't control it? The kids can't control it to some extent. The parents can't control it. What advice do you have for communicating with your child when you find yourself in those scenarios?
There's no good solution. Everything's going to feel kind of lame. But I think the biggest piece is, it's true, it doesn't feel good right now. But I think the biggest pieces are acknowledging those feelings, acknowledging that disappointment. It's real and it's understandable and it's okay. So really sitting with their child without having to say, but it's okay, or but you shouldn't be that worried about it. Just acknowledge it really stinks this year and just let it sit at that. And it's hard for parents to pause with just that negative emotion in the air, but that's what it is. And leaving it at that actually is really validating to the child because they feel heard and they feel like someone actually is understanding them and isn't trying to make them get out of that down feeling. And then I think once that has been established and they feel heard in that, what can we do? Can we FaceTime grandma? Can we bake cookies and drop them off at the doorstep? Can we do something special that's maybe a new tradition this year and try to plan something together that gives that control, that choices back in, that will feel good, even though it won't feel the same, and acknowledge that.
Totally agree with Sarah. Love the idea of validating feelings because, and this is from the perspective also of like tweens and teens and whatnot, is because sometimes they just need someone to that listens to them and not necessarily problem solve. Of course, giving the choices is still part of that process. But, listening and validating and saying like, acknowledging the disappointment and the sadness, but then also, encouraging there are still ways that we can, whether it's over Zoom or however it is, there are positive social activities that can occur this holiday season, and maybe you collaboratively come up with something as a family or with your children of what you can do. It's a new tradition, or like Sarah said, there are other new things that you could try.
It sounds to me like there's not an anti-technology approach that you would suggest, because obviously FaceTime, Zoom, other platforms are helping folks stay connected. But I know there are mixed theories or many theories about young children and screen time. Do you have any thoughts about whether or not that should be minimized, maximized, used in a certain way?
I think there's no right answer. There's no right amount. But, as kids get older, the likelihood is that they will be on screens more. And right now, even in lower school, we had our first week of Sanford Connected this week, and our kids were on screens longer, right, than they're used to, at least during the school hours, of course. But it's really targeted to what kids are learning. It's a way for them to socialize. It's a way for them to interact in a different way, and to learn. And so those are the times we need our kids to be on screens. The other times of day, I think, if you can minimize it some so that it's not a constant presence, it's again, here's one of those, how can you connect with grandma and grandpa, but you can't have them be a babysitter at your house because of COVID. Can they be on Zoom for a little while and do an activity with them, right? I mean, I get it. I get parents are working, they're busy, they're trying to navigate it all. So there's no right answer. It's just look at the content, right? What is it that your kids are watching? What is it quality stuff? Are you doing it with them sometimes? Are you playing some games with them? Are you being active with them on a screen? Just have a good old dance party, if you want, and have it be on a screen, with other silly dances or something. So it depends on the content. I think it depends on, you definitely don't want it to be a constant thing, but it's going to be there. And it is, and Courtney, you may focus on this when you talk about kind of that middle age group. It is a way for them to socialize, and it's necessary. It is necessary at this point for them to be able to be social.
Completely agree. Exactly what you said, Sky, in terms of like the content. I think it's less about the amount of time right now, and it's more of like, what are your children doing online and what's the content that they're encountering? And so especially for, the middle schoolers and the teenagers, and I'm sure Sarah will speak to this as well. It is vital right now that they that's how they're engaging online. They're staying in touch with their friends is important. And so whether that is video games or social media, that's offering a meaningful experience for them. Also, if you are like, there is, I guess, a certain amount of like, there is the too much. But if you are worried about that, it goes back to having that conversation with your students. So talking to your children about their online experiences and making sure that they're, are you aware of the games that they're playing and what they're observing? And are you observing their mood and, happiness relative to what they are doing online? Mm-hmm. So again, just checking in on what is their behavior related to the technology, and again, less of like how much and more of what is it that they're doing and what are they accessing, and are you having a conversation about what they're accessing as a family?
Sarah, I'd love to hear some of your perspective. I know we're talking preschool through 6, and you mostly interact with 9th through 12th grade students, but I know there are parents out there saying, I've got older kids too, and I would love to know thoughts about technology with respect to that age group.
Sure. Yeah, so I think of it in terms of interactive and social screen time. So FaceTime, an interactive game, or social, even a video game, but their other friends are on that same platform playing together. That's a little bit different than passively scrolling through something where you're not interacting with it at all. There's no right or wrong. There's no right amount. I do think balance is important. And I also think it's important to give yourself as a parent, and even your teens and younger kids, some grace, knowing that the amount is likely higher now than it would be in a different year. And that's okay too. It's okay if whatever balance looks for you right now doesn't look how you wish it would look or how it looked in 2019. I think the other piece, and Courtney alluded to this, is especially as kids get older, including them in conversations, asking your teens, what feels like an appropriate amount of screen time? How do you feel when you've been on Instagram all day? Do you like the content that you follow, or does it make you feel badly about yourself? Having those conversations without judgment, with open curiosity, asking them truly just to learn, and then seeing where they go with that conversation in terms of, you would be surprised, a lot of teens will say, they'll own it. They'll say, yeah, honestly, I wish I didn't spend so much time on Instagram. It doesn't make me feel good about myself. Or I wish I put limits on my phone. Maybe I will. They'll come up with their own boundaries sometimes. And then as a parent, you can help enforce those or help find apps that will set limits with them. And I think as long as they have buy-in into that limit setting process and they're a part of that conversation, they're going to be much more likely to be engaged with and willing to follow whatever boundaries you guys have set as a family.
You mentioned apps, which leads me to my next question. It's almost like you will know exactly what I'm going to ask about next, but I think there are probably parents out there who are dealing with children who are feeling stressed and wondering what resources might there be to help me. Could you all share a few resources that might be good for parents to consider?
Sure. Some of our favorites, and I think as we four have navigated this last 9 months, we have offered some resources in terms of apps and websites for our families. We will continue to kind of keep looking always, but I think my favorite that I go back to time and time again is Child Mind, which is just an amazing resource. I believe it's childmind.org. But just they have daily tips, they have experts, they have resources in terms of just about any topic you could imagine involving kids and stress and the pandemic and a variety of different resources. And then even beyond that, they have links to other resources in terms of, is it time to consider, some outside support, right? You've done what you can as a parent, and how can we support, how can this organization, I guess it is a nonprofit organization as well. How can they support in other ways as well? And then I think for the tech side of things, I always go back to Common Sense Media, which is a great one for lots of things, kid related, but just another great tool to kind of rate our technology.
I agree with Child Mind Institute. Along with that, I also use Kids Health from the Moors and Edutopia. Also just great websites and just a lot of good information, quick reads, so some quick articles backed by research, and then, just covers a variety of topics. So everything from, technology to developmental milestones, those types of things that you may be wondering for your child, just really great resources.
Yeah, Courtney and Sky mentioned some great ones. I'll do a plug for an author I really admire who is more focused on the teenage age group. Her name is Lisa D'Amour, and she writes a column for the New York Times on parenting teens. And she also has a podcast and is a really great resource for some common teen questions that come up for a parent. So I'd recommend checking her out. And I think, Sky alluded to getting outside support. Don't be afraid to use therapists as a resource. If you're noticing significant changes and things are really difficult in your home, call a local therapist, talk to your school counselor about recommendations in the area, and get support for either yourself or your children, your family. And therapists can be a really good just sounding board to help process through what's going on. And even though they can't make the pandemic go away, they can often make managing the day-to-day stressors that come along with it more manageable.
I feel as though we've covered a wealth of information in this session, but before we sign off, I'd like to ask if there are any final thoughts any of you would like to share.
I would just say, I think I mentioned this earlier, continue to give yourself grace, continue to give your children that leniency. Well, leniency is not the right word, the understanding and that acknowledgement that things are tough right now, and that's okay.
Agree completely. And just, it's really hard to be in those places of discomfort right now, but we do know, it would be strange if we weren't having these reactions to the world around us, right? We see it in our students, we see it in ourselves. This is just a struggle. And so helping to name it, as we've talked about, helping to, understand it, helping to, find ways, not around it, but find things that you can still do. Finding happy moments, playing a lot, getting outside. I think any of those kind of normal day-to-day things that really, more than anything, our kids love, just that normal day-to-day, that there's mom and dad, we are here, we're present, we're in our house, we're together. I think that goes a long way in a time like now, even when we can't do all the things that, that we want to do.
Yeah, we were talking about this week during advisory for middle school. We were just talking about perseverance during a time like this, and as much as we don't want it to be the new normal, we certainly are in a different time, and we can still persevere and find new ways of connection, even if we may not like it or may not like that change that comes with it, but we still can and will find new ways of connection. And so, just encouraging that over the holidays. Please, lean on each other and be together and connect.
Great advice. And I can't thank you enough for being here, taking time out of your schedules to bring this information to our viewers. This is going to hopefully be the first of several video podcasts we're doing. I think it went really well. I'm letting everybody know that this is sort of a work in progress, the very first time. So thank you. I do want to tease to our next episode of this series, which will be covering the same topic, but for 7th to 12th grade students. So I hope everybody will come back and watch again.